Hello ladies, it is Tiffany of Clarity, Confidence, Courage, Women's Empowerment. And today I want to talk about a question that comes up every now and again with my coaching clients and even women online. And that question is, how long should I wait to get remarried after a divorce? Like a couple months, a couple years, like when my kids graduate from high school, like how long should I wait? When is a good time? Today, I want to discuss the answer to that question and really deep dive into my beliefs around how long you should wait after you get divorced in order to remarry. As always, make sure you share, like, and subscribe, and let other women know about this channel so they can get some tips and some tricks about how to recreate a life that they absolutely love, especially after a divorce. All right, let's jump into this content. Now, first, I want to talk about this concept of why someone would actually want to get married again if they've gone through a difficult marriage and ended up getting a divorce in the first place. You would think like, well, you're divorced. Why would you want to go through that all over again? Well, I want to talk about this idea that, marriage in and of itself is not a lot of times the reason people get divorced. That's like saying, I broke up with my best friend because we were friends, and I hate friendship. I mean, people don't get divorced necessarily, depending, but for the most part, they don't get divorced because they hate the concept of marriage. They get divorced because they have issues within the relationship itself. But when you think about it, if you don't have any issues in your relationship and you get along fine, the idea of coupling is very common among human beings. Even animals couple, right? And coupling has its benefits. And so when people think about the idea of marriage in terms of coupling, they think about the benefits of coupling. You come together, you bring your finances together, you have someone to do things with, you have someone to talk to about different things. You share different outings or trips. You have other couples groups that you go out with. And then some women like being married because they like the idea of physical safety. Maybe they felt safe when they're in the home with someone, their partner. Even if you didn't get along that great, at least you knew someone was there and you weren't just alone all the time, right? So people, a lot of times, even after they get divorced, they miss that aspect of the coupling, of doing things as a couple. So that's the reason why a lot of people think after they get divorced, am I ever gonna get married again? When should I get married? So when should you get married again? What are some things that you should be thinking about when you talk about time frame? Well, the first thing I want to say is that when it comes to getting married, anybody, whether you're divorced, whether you're single, you should ask yourself the question specifically, why? Before you talk about when, ask yourself why. Why do you actually want to get married again? If you need to, sit there and write down the pros and cons, because there's a difference between being in a fulfilling, loving, long-term partnership with someone. You don't have to be married to have that. Even cohabitating, you don't have to live with someone in this day and age in order to be with them. You don't have to marry them in order to live with them. So marriage specifically, especially if you live in the United States and a lot of other countries, really implies a legal aspect, meaning you're signing a document saying that you are legally bound to this person. And some people may call marriage different things, but I'm specifically talking about marriage in terms of legalities. You sign a contract, you're changing your names, you may have to move houses, you may have to blend your families if you have children. Things like life insurance policies and taxes as a married couple. These are all things that legal marriage a lot of times requires you to do, right? Because it's part of the law. When you legally get married, you then have all these legalities that go along with a legal marriage, a marriage where there's a legal contract and it's recognized by the government. So there's people who are in long-term loving relationships, happy partnerships, and they are not married. And there's people who are in long-term loving relationships, happy partnerships, and they are legally married. See the difference? So ask yourself, what is the benefit of making it legal versus just being in a long-term relationship without getting married? Therein lies, there's an underlying reason of why you want to marry again. It's not just that you want a life partner or companionship or you want to live with someone. You can do those things without getting married. So ask yourself why you want to go through the legal process and in order to solidify this partnership that you're building together with this person. What does that mean to you? And I'm not trying to say there's a wrong or right answer. I'm just telling you, be willing to ask yourself the question. Some people may say, well, Tiffany, I grew up in a traditional household. And so for me, if I'm going to live with someone and share my life with them, I want to have that legal signature bonded to them type of thing. That's how I was raised. And that's perfectly fine. Some people may say, look, let's just be honest. If I'm going to bring my finances into a situation with someone and we're going to, have some things around taxes and we're living together, we might as well get married. Some people might say, well, health. Tiffany, if something ever happened to me, I want to know that my lifelong partner has the legal right to make decisions about my health. So there's so many reasons of why you might want to have it legalized. But the question is for you to sit down and think through that part. Think through your why. And your why is all of that matters is what's important to you. Now that you've asked yourself the why questions, the next part of this process, as far as trying to figure out when a good time frame is for how long you should wait till after you get divorced to get remarried again, is to really start asking yourself questions about you. Because the time of getting remarried really is irrelevant as far as days, months, weeks, years. That part really doesn't matter. What really matters are these next topics that I'm gonna just bring to your attention. Number one, healing. Have you healed old wounds? Have you allowed yourself after your divorce to really dig into what got you in that first marriage to begin with? What was the attraction to that person to begin with? What were the issues going on in that first marriage to begin with? What was going on in you that allowed you to be in what could have been a very tumultuous or very just unhappy relationship? Because if you haven't healed those wounds, 9 times out of 10, you're going to take the same stuff and take them to that new marriage. So when you're thinking about when you should get remarried, ask yourself, have I healed? The second thing I'd like to bring up is financial security. When you talk about marriage, especially again, legalizing it, a lot of money stuff comes up. Their finances, your finances, retirement, savings, accounts, businesses, assets, liabilities, especially if you have children, all that stuff comes up. Should you get a prenup? Should you not get a prenup? All those questions will come up again if you decide to get legally married. And you want to go into a situation, especially if you've already been divorced, where there is a healthy concept when it comes to money, to finances, budgeting. What that looks like. There needs to be a transparency. They know what's going on with your finances, you know what's going on with theirs, and coming together is a smart decision, a smart financial decision. You don't want to put yourself in a situation with someone where your finances are great and theirs are terrible, and you haven't worked out or a plan or a remedy to get them taken care of before you get married. That is the recipe for disaster. Finances are one of the biggest reasons people get divorced in the first place. So something to think about when you talk about, when should I get remarried again? Think about your finances. And I'm not saying your finances have to be perfect. What I'm saying is you want to be in a situation where you are feeling comfortable with your financial environment, with your financial portfolio, so that when you're with that person and you want them to be comfortable with their financial portfolio. So when you come together, you both are able in a place where you could have a discussion about finances and that you know that you are financially compatible. You know that as you go forward in your next marriage, that finances won't be an issue, that finances won't be the thing that pulls you apart. So next, you need to think about boundaries. Do you have solid boundaries? 9 times out of 10, a big part of your first divorce probably had something to do with a little bit about boundaries, either boundary violations or boundaries that were way too harsh. A lot of times when I talk to my clients that have gotten a divorce, when they describe what their marriage was like, there were no clear boundaries. And yes, even in a marriage, you need boundaries. You and your spouse need to have boundaries around your personal, independent selves, like who you are as a person, boundaries within yourself. But you also need to have boundaries with each other, what you allow, what you don't allow, how far you're willing to go, how far they're willing to go. You need to have boundaries with family members. So understanding your own boundaries is very important before you jump into another marriage. If you had no boundaries in your first marriage and your in-laws ran the show and it got on your nerves, but you never really spoke up and you never took care of it, then if you haven't made a decision to have those types of conversations going forward, it's not going to get worse. Again, that goes back to the first thing. You haven't healed a part of yourself. So if you're in a relationship and you haven't spoken up about what your boundaries are, what their boundaries are, how involved you want family members to be in your relationship or not involved, then that is something you need to think about way before you think about when you should be getting married again. The next question to ponder is, are you ready to give and receive? Are you ready to be in a reciprocal relationship? It sounds kind of silly to talk about reciprocity and giving and receiving because in a lot of women's minds, they think, well, Tiffany, I am a giver. Why would my spouse not want to give to me? Why would I not want to receive? Well, this goes back to that healing part. If you grew up in a household where you were, not really allowed to receive, you were taught to be a giver and people around you really took, and you really didn't have boundaries around how much you gave, and that issue came up in your first marriage, then it'll probably come up in your next marriage. When it comes to marriage and long-term relationships in general, even if it's not legalized, giving and receiving is very integral. And if someone is giving and giving and giving, and the other person is taking, there's going to be a building up of resentment. And giving can be in any form, whether that's financially giving or emotional giving or, physical effort giving. After a while, if you don't balance it out, it's going to take its toll on both sides. So you have to be in a place where you can ask yourself, what was the level of giving and receiving in my first marriage? Was I happy with that level? And if not, how do I balance that out and how do I articulate that to my next spouse about my kind of beliefs around giving and receiving? Part of marriage, it can be so amazing when you are with someone that gives and receives, and you do the same. You give and you receive. And on the flip side, you have to be open to receiving. That's another issue that I find with so many women. They give until they give out, but they don't allow themselves to sit back and receive sometimes. Receiving is nice. It's nice to get things. It's nice to get gifts. It's nice to get compliments. It's nice to get taken care of sometimes. Be okay with receiving things as well as giving. So having that balance. So before you think about when should I get married again, have you made a decision about your giving and receiving, and is it balanced for you? And lastly, the question that I really want you to think about when it comes to, Tiffany, when should I get married again? I want you to think about your vision for your life. Like, what is the ultimate vision that you see as you move forward? And I'm not saying you have to have all the steps and the answers and the know-how. I'm just asking you, where do you see for yourself in retirement when you're in your 60s or 70s or 80s and you're with that person? Are you living in Hawaii and happily retired? Are you, playing with grandchildren? Did you have children? Do you want children? Like, what is the vision for your life? So if you're single and you don't have a vision for your life, it's time for you to start getting really crystal clear on what the next steps of your life are going to look like, so that when you start dating someone, you can make sure that that person has the same kind of vision or on the same path as you are. Or if you're in a relationship with someone and you're contemplating whether or not you should be marrying them as your next marriage, you need to make sure you both have a shared vision. What goals do you have for the relationship? What are you doing together as a couple? These are things that we don't think about before we get married, but they come up when you get married. And you get so lost in the marriage because neither of you have clear direction because you haven't discussed a shared vision. So again, these are just questions to contemplate and think about when it comes to asking yourself, when should I get married? Because the truth is, you can get married, remarried, whatever you choose to. But whether or not it's going to be a smart decision is all up to you pondering these questions and really doing an assessment for yourself on where you are. Are you emotionally, mentally, and physically prepared to be a part of a coupling again and to make it a legal agreement? Are you in that space? And if you are, then yes, go ahead and get married. And if you are not, take it back to the drawing board and start getting some clarity for yourself before you move into another marriage with someone else. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this discussion. I really wanted to take it to a whole nother level and put it out there, my thoughts around remarriage and how long you should wait to get married. There really is no set time. It's all about what is going on inside of you, what's going on inside of your life, and how you want to move forward. Now, if you're in a place where you're divorced and you're like, Tiffany, I really do love the idea of being in a coupling and that whole concept of marriage, but it just didn't work out, then definitely let's chat. I help women that have gone through a divorce, that want to clean up their life, that want to get clear on their goals, clear on their vision, and really take the steps to move forward and to really get centered on who they are, their new identity, and how to be happy with themselves. So that if they do choose to move forward into another marriage, they bring that new woman into that relationship so it can be amazing and a beautiful partnership. Again, hope you enjoyed this video. As always, share, like, and subscribe to the channel, and I will be seeing you next time. Bye.